We welcome you to episode 28 of the second season of the Exit Philosophy podcast. It is the Major League Baseball All-Star Break edition. And your beloved Toronto Blue Jays have stormed into the break with a 44-52 record, fresh off a 5-4 9-game road trip out west. He's Richard Griff, and I'm Scott MacArthur, and we're going to talk a little home run derby. We pushed recording back a day this week so that we could talk a little home run derby. The game is tonight. We are recording this around the lunch hour of Tuesday, July the 16th. And we're also going to, you see this? If you're watching on youtube.com/@exitphilosophy, I did me some research. I created the parameters and did me some research. We're going to talk about the league's most successful franchises since Rogers Communications bought the Toronto Blue Jays in the early 2000s. Griff, what's up?
And for those listening, not watching, Scotty Mac is using pen and paper to do his research. That's old school. I love it. I love it. Watch the home run.
The mic.
Watch the home. I mean, first of all, let's begin with the fact that the Jays haven't lost in 3 days now. So that's perfect. That's good.
Despite their best efforts on Sunday.
And that's correct. The seventh. Yeah, no, they need to regroup. And my question is, why does that 5-4 road trip that they had going into the break seem such like it was a disaster, like it was a meltdown? 5 wins, 4 losses should be celebrated, but internally, I can't even see a reason to feel optimistic after that.
Well, 5-4 out to Seattle, San Francisco, Arizona. Forget about the quality of the opponents, whether they're good, whether they're mediocre, whether they're not good. And I would argue all those 3 teams are in the realm of mediocre. The Mariners happen to lead their division, the AL West right now. They would be a playoff team if the playoffs started today. So rank them higher than San Francisco and Arizona. But you've got variations of mediocrity. But a West Coast trip, Griff, like we covered enough of those, it doesn't matter. It's just a tough grind. You're in a different part of the continent. You're playing in a different time zone. You're a world away from home base and what you're used to, etc. And when you go out there for a while, and I'm sure you've got some great stories of your days with the Expos when those West Coast trips were like, kind of like what the Jays just went through. 3 cities, 3 series, a week and a half away. It's tough. So 5-4 is a pretty good number. But the answer to your question, and I think you asked it knowing the answer, but the answer to the question is a good team would have at least gone 7-2 because the Blue Jays are in such a state, and in particular with their bullpen, that the loss in San Francisco and the Friday night loss in Arizona were disastrous, were horrific. And I'm seeing all this stuff on social media about John Schneider. And look, a bad bullpen will make any manager look like an idiot, and a good bullpen will make a mediocre manager look like a brilliant man because he's just got to tap the right button and pick the right guy in the 8th and the 9th innings. So I think that's why, Griff, is that they should have won more games on this trip, but their beleaguered and battered and brutal bullpen cost them.
And I think the bullpen, I mean, that's a great point because you can use your nerds to plot out the windows of opportunity for your lefties and the right spot to bring in a Nate Pearson near the bottom of the order, or Zach Pop, where they have a chance with 4 hitters at the bottom of the order to get through and hand it off to one of the high leverage. But when your high leverage guys are injured, these guys all become sort of interchangeable, and when they get into high leverage situations, you're not guaranteed success. I think for the Blue Jays, one of the most meaningless stats at the end of this year is going to be 1-run record, because they've come from ahead so many times to create a 1-run victory or a 1-run defeat. It means nothing. You can't say they're good at winning close games because of their 1 one-run record because of the way they arrive at that final. It's like, hang on, boys. We've got a 5-run lead with 9 outs to go. Let's see if we can hang on tonight. And as many times as they do is also as many times as they don't. And it's a disaster. Jimmy Garcia coming back after the break, which is good. But now they have to bridge between the 6th inning when their starter goes and the 9th inning when they can bring Garcia in, if he is returning to what he was before after the injury.
Well, we can even talk about that, Griff. I mean, there's a few things there. I keep coming back to Nate Pearson, and I ask myself, what could this guy have been if he had focused on being the best pitcher he could be? Because there was all this talk about how he wanted to throw a baseball 110 miles an hour at some point. I mean, it's okay, great. And then what? You know, your arm falls off, or if it happens to somehow stay attached, you've thrown a ball 110 miles an hour. Like, I'm old enough to remember now, about a week ago, when he had 2 consecutive good outings and the gods from heaven were praising this new 2-seam sinker that he had.
Yeah.
You know,
it's tough to incorporate a new pitch in the middle of the season. I mean, it can work. It can work for a while, and then you throw one bad pitch and it gets tonged and it looks bad. But I think, just observing Nate Pearson, I think a good thing for him is his desire now to reconvert into a starting pitcher like Garrett Crochet. He's using those guys as an example for him. So maybe if he's still here with the Blue Jays next spring, you know, given the state of the Blue Jays sort of looking to get rid of some of the assets that they have right now, maybe there'll be room temporarily for a guy like Nate Pearson with a new attitude and a new pitch that he hasn't really used properly to sort of work at becoming the next Garrett Crochet, because his arm is pretty good. And if he has added a 3rd or 4th pitch that he can throw for strikes, maybe there is hope. There is hope in his mind, and that's the first step.
And with Jimmy Garcia presumably back for Friday and the kickoff of the unofficial second half, everybody is past the halfway point in terms of games played.
Yeah, but we're expecting them to win 44 in the unofficial second half. They won 44 in the unofficial first half. That would give them 88 wins and a chance at a wild card.
There you go. Yeah. So they won 44 of, now you're making me do quick math. 44 of 90, 44 of 96 games. And now they're going to have to win 44 of 66 games.
Yeah. It's doable.
And no question about it. I mean, there'll be so much run prevention that they'll just win a bunch of games 2-1, and they'll win 2/3 of their remaining games, and they'll get to 88 wins, and they're not going to trade away 3 or 4 players off their major league roster and replace them with kids. So it looks good. I mean, 44 would appear to be the minimum, Griff. Okay. Sarcasm sensed. Jimmy Garcia back presumably Friday. What's the deal here over the next couple of weeks? Like, if he's your closer, okay, I would have him close in closer situations. But given the fact he's missed about a month with injury, Griff, I also want him out there every other day, regardless of situation, to show potential acquiring teams that this guy is healthy, good to go. Make your phone calls now.
Exactly. And if he goes 3 times every second day, so over the course of a week, if he throws 3 times and he comes out healthy, I think that is enough for another team to say, hey, let's go get this guy because he's got great stuff. But in the meantime, I wouldn't install him as a closer over Chad Green. I think Chad Green has at least earned the right for a mediocre team to be the closer, given his performance. I mean, other than that first pitch bomb that he gave up in the 9th inning, I think it was a 0-0 game or a 1-1 game, and he lost it. He's been pretty good, and he's been as advertised. So until you see what Jimmy Garcia is, I'd have him as the 8th inning guy and Chad Green as the 9th. But that's a huge improvement over what they've been running out there in the meantime. I think Trevor Richards is as good as gone if somebody will take him over his season-long numbers, because recently he has not been good. I think maybe people are sitting on one pitch or the other. When you only throw two pitches, fastball and changeup, it's like flipping a coin. There's not a third side to a coin, so you got a pretty good chance of guessing. And I think people are doing that right now. And he got rid of his slider, which if he incorporated it, it's time to get back and just throw it occasionally just to put it in people's heads, because right now he would be a guy that I wouldn't trust in the 8th or 9th inning. And that's not just me. It's just the results that have happened for him in the last 3 weeks.
And I don't even blame him, Griff. I mean, that's not his role in an ideal world, right? I mean, when you drew this up at the start of the year or in spring training, Jordan Romano was the closer. Tim Meza was coming off of a really nice season last year. Jimmy Garcia, high leverage guy, didn't project him to be as good as he's been, but was certainly in that setup conversation. Chad Green was coming back from injury and, was going to pitch in high leverage situations. They had a lot of guys ahead of Trevor Richards for the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. I mean, Richards was, we want to go back a couple of months. Richards, a guy who could be an opener if he pitched well and kept the pitch count down. He'd go into the 3rd inning. Like, he was almost one full-time through type of guy. And now you're asking him, who doesn't throw 98, 99, 100, to get you 3 key outs in the 8th. I just don't think that's what he's built for. And I don't think it's an offense to him to say that. It's just not a match for the situation, but it's a necessity because of where they're at with their bullpen.
Yeah, and another team that's a contender at this point of the season could put him in the role that he built for, and that would be middle innings, 4 or 5 outs, and leverage, but not the highest leverage in the 8th or 9th. And I think that there are teams that could use a pitcher like that. So I see him being more valuable for another team than he would be for a rebuilding or reloading Blue Jays down the stretch.
Yeah, like Richard's a guy who will have issues at times with the home run, but we can define leverage in different ways. Your starter has a rough outing, is up into the 80, 90, 100 pitch range in the 4th inning, but you're still in the game. You're down 2, you're down 3. Trevor Richards, a guy who can come in and get you 6 to 9 outs and keep that game where it is to give your offense a chance to chip away and see if it can't come back. I mean, that's more the Trevor Richards, if he's not opening, that I think fits, as opposed to a role he's been thrust into due to the leverage injuries the Jays have suffered.
Yeah, we've seen that. We saw that with Kikuchi and Barrios recently, is that when those guys are out there, you don't expect that you're going to be out of the game. But if they stumble and falter, you need a guy, because you're expecting to win and compete in the game that those guys are starting. And it's happened recently. And they even won one the other day in that situation. So, there are guys. You look at Ryan Burr, who his first time up was just brutal, but lately he's had some good stuff. He's had good approach. He's been aggressive and he's throwing strikes. So maybe you give him a shot. But just moving on to another topic here, I think
got a burr in his saddle, Griff.
Right, like.
I had to fit that in before you switched topics.
At 45 degrees in Phoenix, nobody else was saying burr. The first shoe dropped when it was discovered, it was reported that Kevin Kiermaier had been placed on, it was called revocable waivers, but there's no such thing anymore. It used to be. What was your impression when you heard that? I mean, to me, that was the beginning of the end of this current Blue Jays roster and what they had been hoping for in 2024.
Well, my reaction was, yeah. Like, I guess it was a thing that it got out, Griff, and if you have insight you want to share on that, or a theory as to how that happened, we can delve further into it. I didn't get the, and sometimes I'm watching and I'm listening and I'm thinking, okay, there's a reason this got said that way, or this topic got that much airtime. You know, there's unease, or there's discomfort, or there's trying to sort of put into perspective a situation that's weird and uncomfortable. The amount of airtime that Kevin Kiermaier getting waived received on the broadcasts was mind-boggling to me. This guy can't hit. I say that as he hit a friggin' grand slam on Sunday. So when I say can't hit, I don't mean quite literally can't hit. I'm just saying look at his statistics as compared to most of his peers in Major League Baseball this season. You and I both talked about this in the offseason. Anybody expecting Kevin Kiermaier to reprise his 2023 offensive output was nuts. And that's borne true. I mean, that was an outlier year for Kiermaier last year offensively as compared to anything he'd done since like 2018. And obviously he's a lot older now, as we all are, than he was in 2018. So I didn't understand the need to sort of frame Kevin as the good guy who loves Toronto and who loves Canada, and it's just awkward because it got out. It's like, this is just a business play where it's clearly over. The season's over. This veteran player's time in Toronto is almost over. And you throw him on waivers. You hope a team claims him, knowing no team will because they don't want to take on the remainder of the contract. And you move on. It was weird that he was playing for them through the whole process, but I didn't understand like the hype around it.
Yeah, all of the talk was from the point of view of the player and how disappointing it was to be on waivers. And as you pointed out earlier, it's not something that normally is revealed. I mean, these things go between a team's computer and Major League Baseball's computer and the players' union. So there's a triangle there, and the information to me must have come out of the union office, either Kiermaier's agent or somebody that Joel Sherman has as a contact there. But for the club, from the club's viewpoint, it was a no-lose. It was like a win-win situation in terms of what should we do with Kevin Kiermaier. They want Dalton Varsho to play center field every day, and then they can try and get some offense into left field. George Springer's bat is coming around a little bit. Varsho is such a valuable defender. And he tripled in every game of that Arizona series, so he's coming around. So there's really no room for Kevin Kiermaier, except as a late inning defensive replacement when you have a lead. And in the last 66 games, it's likely that, that would be a Maytag repairman, just for people of a certain generation.
I remember the Maytag repairman, Griff. I do.
But so the worst that could have happened, or one of the win-win situation that could have happened, is that somebody claims the $4.5 million remaining on Kevin Kiermaier's contract, and the Blue Jays sort of dip into or reduce the amount of luxury tax that they'll be paying at the end of the season. Or he clears waivers, and teams are now aware that the Blue Jays are very interested in getting rid of Kiermaier. Let's call them and see if they'll pay down most of that contract, maybe all the way down to the major league minimum that we would owe the rest of the way. And then we'll send them, because they're paying it down, we'll send them a prospect that can fill in for them at the Class A level or even Double A. So those are the two options with Kiermaier. They don't want to release him because then they'll still owe him the $4.5 million, but they dangle him on waivers, and if nobody claims him, he keeps playing. And that's the thing about it becoming public, is that there's often situations with veteran players making too much money for the production that they're giving that go and clear waivers, as Kiermaier did, and continue playing, and nobody says anything. But in this situation, it was out there. And then, as you said, Television spent way too much time talking about it. Kiermaier's reaction was a news story as well. But, it's routine. I remember in 2000 when there was revocable waivers because there was a second trade period in August. So you had to clear waivers in order to be traded in August. And people would put everybody on their roster on revocable waivers. And if somebody claimed to pull them back, and then they'd pick up the phone and negotiate a deal. And that was how it worked. But there's no revocable waivers anymore. So the Blue Jays were clearly willing to lose the Kiermaier contract. And in 2000, when Jose Canseco was with Tampa, he was put on revocable waivers. And the way that the waivers works is the team with the worst record, if there's multiple claims, the team with the worst record gets the player. So the Red Sox and Yankees were duking it out for the division title, and the Red Sox were slightly ahead of the Yankees. So the Yankees wanted to block the Red Sox from getting Canseco. So they claimed him on revocable waivers, and Tampa Bay just, because this is what Tampa Bay does with expensive contracts, they just said, okay, you can have him. And the Yankees went, what? They were not expecting to end up with Jose Canseco, and they ended up winning the division and going to the postseason. But
they won the World Series.
Yeah.
That was the last of the 4 out of 5 years where they won the World Series.
Yeah, that was the Mets series, right?
Yeah, Subway Series.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the year after, they blew the Diamondback series. That's right. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that used to happen. And now when you put a guy on waivers, you better have a win-win situation like the Jays did with Kiermaier. But it was much ado about nothing in terms of what we both think of that situation.
Well, the two examples in Blue Jays history that I can think of with regard to revocable waivers, Griff, and you outlined it, right? There used to be a July 31st trade deadline. You didn't need waivers. Then there was an August 31st trade deadline. So for that month after July 31st, you had to put a guy on revocable waivers. If he got claimed, you could either leave him to the team who claimed him, or you could pull him back. And then you were kind of limited in what you could do. You could work out a trade with the claiming team if you wanted to. But so a lot of these guys sneak through. But 1998, you remember how aggressive Gord Ash got in 1998? That was Carlos Garcia and Orlando Merced from the Pittsburgh Pirates for a bunch of like Jose Silva and a bunch of other kids, and Benito Santiago as a free agent, and Randy Myers.
Yeah.
Remember Randy Myers? Randy Myers was waived in August. The Padres claimed him, and the Jays were like, thank you, bye-bye. And Myers actually ended up contributing to that Padres team that lost to the Yankees in the World Series that year. Then 10 years later, Alex Rios had been signed to a long-term extension a year or two prior, and he had that incident that in a more advanced social media age would have gotten even more traction than it did at the time, although it did get traction, where he was out front of a hotel and had some things to say to some people recording him and wasn't playing all that well. And Jays put him on revocable waivers in August, I think, of 2008, and the White Sox claimed him because they wanted to block some other team from getting him, and the Jays were like, thank you.
Yeah. Similar situation for sure.
Yeah.
When you said, finish your thought there.
Well, no, but just with Kiermaier, and when I say this, we both have the utmost respect for Dan Schulman. One of the things Dan said on the broadcast was, this happens all the time. Guys are on waivers all the time. I think what he was referring to was under the old system.
Yeah, I do believe that.
In August, after the July 31st trade deadline, you put everybody on waivers because you could call everybody back if they got claimed. So I don't think guys are on waivers all the time.
No.
Like they were. So I just, Griff, I don't know, like, how did Kevin Kiermaier become this great bastion of controversy? Like, to whose advantage? Okay, his agent throws it out there, or the Players Association. Like, it's not, this isn't Bryce Harper being put on waivers by the Philadelphia Phillies, for God's sake.
Yeah, and Kiermaier himself said that he was surprised at the lack of interest in him this past offseason compared to the offseason before when he was coming off injury, and then put up some decent numbers for the Blue Jays in the one season that he played in 23. So like, just because you put a guy on waivers, it's a contract that only you were willing to pay him. So now why, after his contra performance offensively, would another team say, hey, we missed out on that, let's pick up the rest of that contract, $4 million. And it's not going to happen.
So there's the question for the general manager. Who were you bidding against when you gave Kevin Kiermaier $10.5 million for the 2024 season? Who were you betting against?
Just for, and the answer is nobody.
We have money because we didn't get Ohtani, so we got to spend this because we've got a budget. Here's 10.5, Kev.
Right. And the thing that a lot of Blue Jays fans, the question that a lot of Blue Jays fans have is, you said you were going to improve the team in the offseason, and then you bring back the same inoffensive center fielder when there's a lot of bats out there that could have been better offensive contributors while playing a sort of a mediocre corner outfield. Granted, Kiermaier's better than those guys, but this team doesn't need run prevention, and we've gone over that week after week after week. This is a team that needs run creation, and they missed the boat on that. There's new rules that Major League Baseball has instituted to add offense to the game, and the Jays missed that boat, or the signals.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Although if you look at OPS numbers across the league, what baseball's done isn't necessarily working in terms of, but I understand the spirit of the ideas of the rule changes was to generate offense. And we'll get into the home run derby and an old buddy, Teoscar Hernandez, winning it, Griff, but like, there's an idea. Dalton Varsho is the future center fielder of the Toronto Blue Jays. It happens every now and then when Kiermaier doesn't play, and it will be true every day, except for the 42 off days he needs to, quote, rest, sports science. But he will be the everyday center fielder next year. George Springer is, for whatever warts he's displayed offensively, although he's come around a bit over the first 4 months of the season, Springer can play a pretty competent right field. To me, you can give a little bit on defense in left field because you have Varsho. If Springer can still display the range that he has shown in right field, you can cheat Varsho in center field a little more to the left side, whatever that may look like depending on each hitter, and he can help cover for whatever range a left fielder like, say, Teoscar Hernandez, who once again is a free agent this winter. It's a one-year deal with the Dodgers he did. Whatever defense you give up in the name of offense out of that available corner outfield spot.
Well, the Blue Jays started the season with 3 outfielders on the 26-man roster. And the scenarios you point out of Varsho, they've wanted Varsho to be the center fielder and Kiermaier to be a 4th outfielder, and pretty much a role that he was built for at this stage of his career. But they haven't found anybody to play defensively in left field. I mean, all the converted infielders that they have, Davis Schneider doesn't play a good left field. They tried Addison Barger. He played an awful left field. So until they find that, and did you mention that Teoscar is available in the offseason?
I mean, Teoscar is a better defensive outfielder than Lourdes Gurriel, and they both have very good arms. So,
yeah,
like,
if Teoscar played left field, I think that with Springer playing out his contract, because that's a contract you can't move in with Varsho in center field, I think that might be the answer that you're looking for in terms of trying to rebuild the faith of the fans moving forward to 2025. And just to watch the home run derby last night, and we were going to talk about that, and that's one of the reasons that we delayed recording until Tuesday so that we could see the home run derby and talk about it. But just the relationship that clearly existed between Vlad and Teo is like it's almost I hate to be sappy, but it's kind of heartwarming to see. And it's something that you watched Vlad Guerrero Jr. through the first 96 games of the season, and it's a relationship that he clearly is missing. And it reminded me of, because the Jays have come so close to advancing to actually winning a postseason game, and they'd won 88, 89, 90, maybe 91, one of those seasons, but they had come close. And so the Jays front office made a mistake of going, well, we need to mix this up. We need to get rid of the fun patrol. We need to get rid of the barrio. And it reminded me of the Expos in 1981 after Blue Monday, when John McHale said, we got to mix this up. We can't come back and run it, because 79, 80, and 81, they had finished second to the eventual World Series champion each of those 3 seasons. So the mistake, the Teo type mistake, was that John McHale traded Larry Parrish, the third baseman, to the Texas Rangers for Al Oliver, who won the batting title and the RBI title in 1982. But the clubhouse was not the same. The clubhouse was different. 82 was not a championship year. 83 was not a championship year with Al Oliver instead of Larry Parrish. And the thinking was, we need to change things up. And they made a mistake. And I think that the Blue Jays also made a mistake with Teoscar and breaking up that dugout and that camaraderie, that relationship that Teo had with the rest of the players in that clubhouse.
I remember, Griff, you tweaked something with me. You'll laugh too, because you know me well enough. You know my history of loving the Chicago Cubs, right?
Oh, yeah.
So after the Cubs made the playoffs for the second consecutive year in 2008 and bowed out in very Toronto Blue Jays fashion, which is to say they were swept by the Dodgers in the division series in 08. They had been swept by the Diamondbacks in the division series in 07. A call by Jim Hendry was made, we need a left-handed bat. And the Cubs traded Mark DeRosa away and brought in Milton Bradley. Milton Bradley is a couple of muffins short of a baker's dozen, and that's putting it mildly and diplomatically. Mark DeRosa, staunch clubhouse guy, yes, a right-handed batter, one of the few offensive players who actually showed up in that Dodgers series in 2008. And when I introduced myself to DeRosa in the Blue Jays clubhouse in spring training in Dunedin in 2013, what do you think I asked him? And it wasn't on the record. I was just like, dude, I gotta let you know, I've been a Cubs fan along. He goes, you can stop right there. I'm still not over it. But again, we need something, because in 08 they had Aramis Ramirez and Derek Lee and all these right-handed hitters. We need a left-handed hitter in the middle of all of that.
Yeah,
and
that's usually it. That's usually how the biggest mistakes in baseball happen, is you think we need one more move to put us over the top, and it turns out to be the wrong move. And I think in this situation, I mean, just watching and by the way, the home run derby on television is much, much more entertaining than it is when you're there in person. And I went to a lot of those derbies in person, and there's so much dead air and dead time, and you don't see the broadcast. The TV broadcast was very entertaining, and granted, it was a really good home run derby, but just some of the stories, and one of them was Teoscar himself talking about when the Dodgers came to Rogers Center earlier in this season, and he sat down, and Vlad was struggling, and he sat down with Vlad, and they went out for lunch or whatever, and they talked about it, and he didn't say what he told Vlad, but from that point on, Vlad really stepped it up, and we've seen the results to this day. Vlad's turned his season around. I mean, the start has really hurt his cumulative numbers, but they will get better as the season goes on. I mean, he had that break of being hit in the hand by Garrett Cole, 2 fingers, so that slowed him down. But just the fact that Teoscar, with one luncheon, was able to turn Vlad around. And then it was almost like Vlad was paying him back by coaching him through the home run derby and getting him $1 million for the win. So,
well, I thought too, Griff, that Vlad wearing a Teoscar Blue Jays jersey.
yeah,
And
that's great.
you know, I think it is just, I love you, brother. That I
Yeah.
think that's the message. It's interesting at the current spot the Toronto Blue Jays franchise is in. That is a bit of a dagger in the hearts of fans. I don't think Vladdy had some kind of message
Yeah.
to the front office, some passive aggressive
No,
message.
hell no. That was one-on-one with him and Teo. Yeah.
But it tells you something, right? It tells you something. And it's a reminder that this game, like any sport, like really in any industry in life, this game is played by people. And how a person, and you know, it's a you have to have the magic touch to please 26 guys all at one time, because different people have different personalities, different needs, different wants, different desires, all of that stuff. But this is a people industry. And I feel, and I've said this in different ways since we launched this podcast more than a year ago, I think the Shapiro Atkins era of the Toronto Blue Jays is robotic because they're robotic. I really think sort of the personal relationship part gets misread and really just is not prioritized.
Yeah, I remember, to your point, I remember the 4 years that I was working in PR for the Blue Jays, and I would go down to the dugout and be there in the 9th inning for a lead, on the stairs watching the last inning, and then take a guest out for Hazel or whoever was out there. And then there were times during a game when I would need to go in the dugout and set up an interview, get a headset. And to me, the highlight was always watching the interaction among the Spanish-speaking players. And even Bo was always in the middle of that group. Bo was in that group and smiling and laughing. And Hector LeBron was there. They didn't need him to translate anything, but he just liked to be on camera, I think. but just the disappearance of that attitude in the barrio, and which started in Buffalo when during the pandemic and continued and was great for that dugout, for that team. It was an identity, and as was the home run jacket, which disappeared in his back. So the jacket disappeared in his comeback. So maybe there's a chance for Teo to disappear and come back, and that's what I would love to see that happen in 2025, with Varsho playing center and Springer playing. I mean, if Springer can play like he's playing now, if that adjustment can stick to his hitting, whereas his bat speed is increased and he's handling velocity better, then that would not be the worst outfield in Major League Baseball.
Well, like Griff, like if you think about it, and a lot of this requires guys getting off to better starts in April and the first part of May, right? You can't all be so bad at the same time that by the time the weather heats up and you begin to turn it around individually and collectively, you're already out of it, because that's where they are right now. And I know the bullpen injuries have negated some good offensive outputs and cost them some games. But Vladdy at first, they haven't traded Bo in my little hypothetical scenario. Bo at short, Springer in right, Varsho in center, Teoscar in left. somebody catching with Alejandro Kirk. Could it be Jansen? Could it be somebody else? Like there's something there. Now, Dalton Varsho's got more than 30 extra base hits, and that's wonderful. He's also hitting under 200 and is a below league average hitter. But with the plus defense, he's a winning ball player. Nobody argues that. So different guys have different skill sets. But with that as a positional foundation, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, although I have a hard time seeing him be as good an offensive player next year as he is this year. He's just
but there is a role for him though.
Well, I'm not saying that. There definitely is, and he's under contract, and he's, if he's hitting like he's hitting right now, I know he's hurt, but was hitting before he got hurt. He's a starter. If he's back to being kind of a utility guy, well, then he's got function at 3 or 4 minimum different positions. But you see the foundation there, the possibility there. And I just really think they got to prioritize offense in the offseason. They're not going to get it at the deadline. But
yeah, to me, the 3 easiest positions to fill on a major league roster in an offseason, if you're on a medium-sized budget, which the Jays are now 9th overall in payroll. If they're going to lose some free agents, then they might have money to spend in these areas that I'm going to describe. One of them is a second catcher. Like a second catcher, every winter there's free agent catchers out there. Maybe somebody from their own farm system is ready to step up. We don't know.
Hey, but who's your first catcher?
Well, if Jansen leaves, you're going to have a 50-50 split. That's the best you can expect out of Alejandro Kirk. But there's plenty of those guys. Plenty of those guys that can catch 3 or 4 times a week. 4th and 5th starters. You look at free agency over the course of any winter, and there's a bunch of names out there of established guys who aren't going to be at the top of your rotation, but can certainly fill in 4th and 5th. And you've got Yariel Rodriguez you're expecting is going to be better. You've got a couple of guys that are there right now. If you're expecting to lose Kikuchi, or if you're going to trade him, you've got a couple of the existing starters. So you need a 4th and 5th guy. You need to identify that. We both thought that Bowden Francis might be better than he has been, and has not responded in any way as a potential 4th or 5th coming up. And then middle relievers, you can, over the course of a winter, you can identify guys with spin. You can identify guys with high velocity that haven't got a chance. So there's so many of those guys that if you believe in your teaching core of coaches and your lab work in Dunedin, then you can sign. I mean, that's how the Rays survived for all those years. They just identify arms, bring them in, and then create a monster. So those 3 areas are easy to build in the offseason, but you need, as you said, to bring in some offense, and that would start with an ability to apologize to Teo for not having faith in him 2 years ago when they were worried that in arbitration he was going to make $20 million, and that would have priced him out of their market at the time. Instead, they went out and spent $12 million on Kiermaier and some other mid-range purchases or rentals. And yeah, so it's salvageable. You don't need to go into a total major rebuild, which we've discussed many, many times on Exit Philosophy. They cannot even consider going into a major rebuild like the Orioles and the Astros did to build what they eventually ended up with, because this stadium demands more than that.
Yeah, and it may require more than one fresh set of eyes and more than one brain that thinks differently than the current grouping of craniums. And we'll see how that plays out. Want to play my little research game, Griff?
Yeah, let's do that. And then we can end up with the amateur draft and what the Blue Jays have done.
Okay, so
let's start with your research on a piece of paper in pen.
Well, it's also on Twitter. I very rarely go on that site, but I figured I'd document it because if it isn't on Twitter, did it really happen? Actually, that's now that it's X, if it's on Twitter, did it really happen? Is actually a legitimate
Yeah, that's
question.
more legit.
So here's the deal. Rogers bought the Blue Jays in the year 2000. So out of fairness to the corporation, I have gone back to 2001, which was their first year of owning the team. And I have looked at all 30 Major League Baseball teams from 2001 to 2023. And I have applied a point system that reflects their maximum accomplishment in each year. So I'll explain what I mean here in just a moment. But if you won the World Series, you get 10 points. So, for example, the New York Yankees, their 4 out of 5 ended in 2000. So they have won one World Series in the 23-year span I'm looking at, 2009. They get 10 points for that. The Boston Red Sox have won 4. They get 40 points for that. If you lost in the World Series, you get 5 points. If you appeared in the championship series, in your league's championship series in a given year, that's worth 3 points. If you won your division, but did not get to the championship series, so you lost in a wild card series, or before that, you lost in a best of 5 division series, you get 2 points. If you won a wild card playoff berth, but didn't get past the wild card game or a division series, you get 1 point. There is no accumulation of points in season. We understand if you won the World Series that you made the championship series and that you either won your division or secured a wild card. If you won the World Series, you get 10 points for that single year. 5 points if you lost the World Series, 3 if you made the championship series, 2 if you won the division but didn't get far in the playoffs, 1 if you won a wild card spot but didn't get far in the playoffs.
So if you're any sort of an also ran, you don't get any points. Like you need to at least get a wild card spot to get a point.
Yeah, you get a point if you did the base, which is make the playoffs.
The Blue Jays, thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So American League 1 through 15 from 2001 to 2023. The Boston Red Sox, 55 points. 4 World Series, 40 points. And by the way, I won't itemize each team because Griff and I don't want to be here till Friday. It's Tuesday as we're talking, but I just use Boston as the example. 40 points for the 4 World Series championships. 3 championship series appearances that they lost for a total of 9 points. They won the division, but did not get past a division series twice. That's 2 times 2 equals 4. They won a wild card playoff berth twice and did not get past a division series. 1 times 2 is 2. So 40 plus 9 plus 4 plus 2, 55 points. Boston is the best team by this crazy guy's metric in the last 23 years. And by the way, they're better than any National League team as well.
But Scotty, you do realize that the Red Sox and your beloved Cubs sink like a stone if you go back to 1918, right?
Well, you go back further for the Cubs, 1908. 1908. The New York Yankees. So Boston is first in the American League, 50, and first in baseball, 55 points. The New York Yankees are second in the AL with 53. The third place team, not surprising given their recent run, the Houston Astros at 50.
And that includes all the years that they finished with 100 losses to try and build what they've got right now.
They did, but you also have to remember that this factors in the playoff appearances in the mid-2000s and losing the 05 World Series to the White Sox. Because the Astros have...
The 05 World Series is the worst World Series I've ever attended. Worst.
Well, it's probably the best World Series Mark Burley ever attended. but we'll take your word for it. Yeah, I was... Yeah, and... Yeah. I'm thinking Houston, a destination. Chicago's awesome, but you're not at Wrigley. Number 4 in the American League is Texas with 25 points. So remember, not only did the Rangers win the World Series this past year into 2023, they also had consecutive World Series defeats in 2010 and 2011. The Los Angeles Angels, this is where it gets a little weird. They're 5th out of 15 in the American League, but remember, they won the 2002 World Series, and they appeared in a couple of championship series in other years in the 2000s. This is all Mike Scioscia stuff. Everything that's happened since Mike Scioscia has been not worth discussing. And they won the American League West 4 times for a total of 8 points. So they had 24 points. The Angels are actually better than you would think.
Well, much better than, like, if you gave me 6 choices, I wouldn't have taken the Angels in the top.
Well, the World Series title is 22 years ago, so it's not exactly top of mind. Tampa Bay, for all the love they get as a small market, 6th in the AL with 19 points. Then you got a mishmash of
Scotty, the Tampa Bay ranking would be very surprising to a lot of our listeners, to a lot of fans.
You would think they're higher or lower?
Yeah, you would think they were higher because of all the hype that they get year after year of being contenders and being there. And when you're going into a season, everybody says, well, they don't spend any money, but they always find a way to win. And like, they don't always find a way to win. They find a way to compete. They always find a way to compete.
They have the 2 World Series losses in 2008 to the Phillies and in 20 in the COVID weird thing to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
4 division titles outside of that, 5 wild card appearances as well. So that gets them to the 19. Then you've got pretty much a run of the American League Central with Oakland in between. And I ranked teams that tied. Detroit, Minnesota, Cleveland all have 18 points. I give Detroit 7th because they have 2 World Series appearances, which they lost. Then I give Cleveland 8 because they have 1 World Series appearance, which they lost, and Minnesota 9 because they don't have a World Series appearance. Minnesota has won 7 American League Central titles and has 1 wild card spot in that span, Griff, and 1 championship series. When I was going through this, the number of times the Twins got swept in best of 3 series,
usually by the Yankees,
astounding. Usually by the Yankees, and I think they lost a wild card play-in game with Barrios on the mound and Paul Molitor managing in 2018, I think it was, to the Yankees. But like, they've been in the playoffs a lot. It's been a struggle for them, not like the Blue Jays, not to just win a series, but to win a game. In a series. Oakland is 10th at 17 points. Then you've got Kansas City 11 and the White Sox 12, tied with 15 points. I gave the Royals 11th because both teams have a World Series title, but the Royals also made it to a World Series and lost. That was the year before they won, when they lost to the Giants. Then at 13, you got the Toronto Blue Jays tied with the 14th place Baltimore Orioles. I give the Blue Jays the advantage because they have 1 more championship series appearance than the Orioles do in this span. And then 15th with 4 points, pulling up the rear, is the Seattle Mariners. So the
Blue Jays, I mean, that's a very unscientific but pretty accurate reading of the American League in this century.
But Griff,
and to have them 13th with all the promise, the hype, and the money recently that they've been able to spend, that's pretty disappointing for ownership.
More people live in Toronto now than do Chicago. Plus, you have the country of Canada as your watching region. And I know there are BCers who love the Mariners, and I live out here in Halifax now. And there are people who grew up on local Boston TV stations and have an affinity for the Red Sox. And there are some jaded Expos fans who will never cheer for Toronto.
But nobody gets 1 million viewers as often as the Blue Jays do because they go coast to coast. Even the Yes Network in New York does not get. They celebrate, they pop champagne when they get 750,000 viewers on a big weekend series.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it's unacceptable,
Yeah.
really, is
It
what it
should be
is.
unacceptable for ownership to look at that and to realize the success of postseason or appearances in postseason that they've had and not try and do something about it moving forward immediately.
We'll rip through the National League just because there's no application to the Blue Jays here. But first, the St. Louis Cardinals with 54 points. The second place National League team won't surprise you. The LA Dodgers, 47. The third place may surprise you, but shouldn't when you think about it because they've won 3 World Series, the San Francisco Giants. 30 of their 40 points come from those 3 World Series titles. Fourth, the Atlanta Braves, 38 points. Fifth, the Philadelphia Phillies with 30. Sixth, the Cubs with 26 points. Seventh, Arizona, and they were the first World Series winner in the 2001 to 2023 span, right? They won in 01, yep. And then they lost the World Series last year, so they got 5 points for that. So 23, they are seventh. Coming in at number 8, the Montreal Expos / Washington Nationals, all 18 points achieved as the Nationals. The 9th seed, Milwaukee Brewers with 13. The Miami Marlins are 10th with 12. The New York Mets, which is really pathetic given their market.
Yeah,
their willingness
that
to
might be
spend
more
money.
pathetic than the Blue Jays.
Yeah, 11th with 10 points. The Colorado Rockies and San Diego Padres tied for 12th with 8 points each. The Rockies have a World Series appearance, the 2007 loss to the Boston Red Sox. So I give them 12th. The Padres, who do not have a World Series appearance, are 13th, both with 8 points. 14th, Cincinnati Reds with 5 points. And with their 3 consecutive wild card game appearances, 13, 14, and 2015, the Pittsburgh Pirates have 3 points.
Yeah, 2 of those because they brought Russell Martin in. And
right.
Then the Jays brought him in to start their own streak in 15
and 2015, Griff, when Jake Arrieta outpitched Garrett Cole. Yep. I remember that one. Well, anyway, kind of a fun exercise, but really, I just wanted to get a sense of, and I know it doesn't, I could have deducted points for 100 lost seasons and gone even further, but really a 95 to 98 loss season also sucks. But I could have done some deduction in it as well, but I just thought, hey, let's rank accomplishment, and teams play to win the World Series, or at least most of them do. So anyway, thought it was fun.
Yeah, let's talk a little June or amateur draft. I said June draft. It used to be in June. Now it's at the All-Star break. Or
you're gonna ask me to break down all these players?
No, because
I've been scouting them all,
not,
Griff.
Yeah, it's not like the NHL draft or the NFL draft, especially where impact players, you can sort of break that down. But I did watch the draft,
or where you've been watching them on Saturdays for 3 years in college. Yeah,
and in baseball, it's a mixture of high school guys and small college and big university programs, and those are the guys that draw the most attention because people actually have seen them play. But I think that the Blue Jays this year in particular, I mean, every scouting director says we're going to draft the best player available on the board. But the Blue Jays obviously looking forward to the immediate future and the fact that we both agree that they can't afford a major rebuild. So that excluded for me in the first 2 rounds the ability to draft anyone from high school because high school guys take longer. Obviously, some of them suffer injuries and never make it. You're rolling the dice more with high school guys. So the Blue Jays needed starting pitching, and they're going to be missing Kikuchi and maybe another starter. And Manoah's hurt, and Tiedemann's down, and Barrera's down, and Adamako's down, and so they have an immediate need, and they in the first 2 rounds. With scouting director Shane Farrell, they chose college pitchers and pretty advanced college pitchers. In the first round, picking 20th overall, they took Trey Yesavage, right-hander from East Carolina University. He's got a 4-pitch repertoire, throws 93 to 95 with a fastball, gets it up to 98. He's got a 4-pitch mix. And if and when he signs, he can probably start next season at Double-A. At worst, it would be high A. So there's a guy that maybe later in 2025 can help, or definitely in 26. And the same with their second pick, who was a right-hander from Mississippi State, Cal Steven. And like, they were definitely drafting out of need. And to me, it reflects the fact that they know they can't be in a rebuild for very long. It's got to be a reload. And we earlier in this episode, we talked about how they could do it, what they need to do, and we included Teoscar, re-signing Teoscar in that mix. But in terms of starting pitching, they got two guys that could help by 2026, and one of them might be ready by the middle or late in the 25 season. So the third pick was a high school left-hander who has a commitment to the University of Miami, which is a traditional baseball powerhouse. So, they're going to have to find money somewhere and bump the bonus that he would get in order to get him to leave the Miami commitment. Anything on Tuesday, the 11th to the 20th round, is all going to be like filler for the minor league system. If somebody eventually turns into a player that can help you in the major leagues, it would be an oddity. So we won't even talk about that. But, the Blue Jays' recent draft history hadn't been that great. They're hoping that one of the first two guys can help them ASAP, because that rotation is an area where they're going to need some help.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, who's a guy who's come up and contributed in a very near-term way, right? Alec Manoah, first round pick 2019, and he was up by May of 2021, right?
Right.
And because 22 was the almost Cy Young season, and 21, 23, so 21, the debut at Yankee Stadium.
And the whole industry, the whole major league industry is becoming younger. We've talked about that on Exit Philosophy also, and I think that they're finally turning in that direction, and because these guys are 21 and 20 years old. Savage 21 and Steven is 20. So like, it's not, you look around baseball and the Blue Jays are facing more and more pitchers who are in their rookie season, and they're not up for the whole year, but they come up whenever there's a starting requirement needed. And the Jays have nobody like that. The Jays currently have nobody. They got to look for an opener, or they struggle. Thankfully they signed solid guys, take the ball every fifth day, but they're going to be missing Kikuchi by the trade deadline. And the farm system is bare at the upper levels in terms of starting pitching, healthy starting pitching. So these two guys will be there as early as the end of 2025. So, they're finally coming around to the conclusion that you don't need to sign 28-year-old free agents starting pitchers, that you can build and have these guys come up and learn at the major league level, as other organizations have proved.
And with that, we will wrap things up, and we're coming to you. You may be listening after the All-Star game, but we're coming to you early in the afternoon on Tuesday, July the 16th. Enjoy the All-Star game tonight, if you happen to be listening in advance of the game. I will, even with my rickety shoulders, pat myself on the back for calling Paul Skeens and Corbin Burns as the starting pitchers.
That was impressive. That was calling it a week ago.
I'm already seeing, Griff, Instagram stories and photos of Skeens and Livy Dunn, his girlfriend, getting off the private jet in Dallas, Arlington. And it's a production, man. It's a show. It's a show.
Yeah.
It's a show about something. There's nothing on the line, but it's a show about something.
But the All-Star break is always, the unofficial halfway mark, a highlight. But I think the highlight for the Blue Jays is actually getting 3 days off and being able to regroup, take a deep breath, and head into what is the last 66 games of the season, see what they can do, see who they can trade, see what they can salvage out of this season. But, for most teams, it's what their stars are going to do at the game. But for the Jays, it's take a deep breath and let's move on. And that's what they're doing right now, other than Vlad, who's having a hell of a time with Teo at the All-Star game.
I'm not going to be, are you comfortable announcing who's going to fill in for me next week? Okay, because it's confirmed. So I will talk about where I'm going next week in 2 weeks when I'm back. I just don't want swarms of people demanding my autograph. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I will talk about, I'm taking a bit of a vacation to a place I've never been before next week. And so I'm not going to be here, but Griff, you've got not only a big name, but a legendary name ready to fill in for me.
Yeah, I have invited to co-host next week the legendary Toronto Star columnist, Dave Perkins, who covered the 92-90. He covered for a lot of years, and in fact is the man who hired me to come from the Montreal Expos to the Toronto Star to replace himself as baseball columnist. And I'm looking forward to it. We got some conversations that we're planning, and some look back at the glory days before Scott MacArthur put together his list of failure by the Blue Jays in this century. So we'll look back at the last century, and then we'll talk about the current Blue Jays as well.
Geez, maybe Perk can jump on your Al Oliver stuff with the Expos and talk about the Al Oliver Blue Jays experience in '85 when he came in toward the end, WAR numbers. That was when I was getting into it, Griff. My only memory of Al Oliver was as a Blue Jay. I know he had like a 15-year career leading up to that. He was right near the end, but I remember, oh my God, there's this guy wearing the number 0 for the Blue Jays. And so.
And Al, a lot of people think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I think he's borderline, but he's now a pastor, a minister back in Ohio. And I follow him on social media, and it's pretty cool. We stay in touch a little bit. So it's all good.
Well, you and Perk next week. It should be great. And I certainly will be downloading and listening to that episode. And if you have stayed with us and you like us each week, please subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate, please like on youtube.com/@exitphilosophy. You can watch us. We do some live post-game shows as well. Griff and I'll get back into that as we get into August, and we'll keep you apprised of our schedule for that. youtube.com/@exitphilosophy, and griffsthepitch.com is Griff's website where you get all of his work, multiple weekly columns, a weekly power rankings, and conversations with current and former Blue Jays, former Montreal Expos. They're all archived. So throw Griff a subscription, and you get the Exit Philosophy podcast on griffsthepitch.com. With that, have a wonderful week. Enjoy the All-Star Game, or hope you enjoyed the All-Star Game if you're listening after the All-Star Game. And we will talk to you next week.
Thanks, Scotty. Have a good week off. And thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next week.